Hey guys, welcome back to Grizzly Valley. Today I'll be first working on some loose ends that I still really needed to tie together, like some small unfinished buildings, some backsides, some path work, and actually a lot of gardening, especially in this area around here, which I'm actually very happy with how it turned out in the end. And in the second part of the video I'll actually be building a weenie again for the weenie fans out there. It's something which I wasn't really planning to do that much, but I had an idea to make a triumphal arch for quite a long time, and I only at this point actually got to it. And while it's not going to be that big, it'll still be quite a central and iconic thing for the Roman area, and a bit of a small sidestep to get back into the Roman area as well, though I will still really need to get back to those general path and park layouts and foliage parts that I've really skipped at this point still in future episodes. So I'll be working still less of in a less linear way of doing certain areas at a time and focusing on certain buildings each episode, but also do some more scattered around work like I'm doing over here with just a lot of smaller, making the entire park come together, as I would always say, really. Which was actually quite a lot of fun in the end as well, and one of the things which are actually surprisingly easy to do but also a lot of fun to do is to make these little one-tile fences and see how you can make them with the objects that we have at the moment, and just copy those buildings over to make one entire fence that sort of looks like it's an actual functioning fence. And you can do a lot of things with these fences. You can just put a lot of objects on them and copy them over to make this sort of round fence which really flows with the paths, which is very easy to do, but it's actually a lot of fun. So I tried a couple of versions of those as well, but this has to be really one of my favorites, with just one simple white beam, a little roof border thing. I'm not entirely sure what it's called, but it's from the sandstone roof, and the balconies, the very small ironwork balconies, just to have that bit of a fence texture on there as well. And I also wanted to really get into some gardening of this area, which was also quite a lot of fun, especially since this is really the first part of the park in a way. I wanted to make sure that I actually got some slightly more fancy foliage in here, much like you would kind of see in Disney, but not quite, since this is not a planned park but has a much more organic layout. So I'm still not going entirely Disney-esque on that, not to mention that it's really hard to do that with just a couple of plants that we have at the moment. But it's still a lot of fun to just try different things with those plants that we have at the moment as well. So I was actually quite happy with that little clock thing over there in the end. Now over here I wanted to try an idea for a small sideways fountain. Like, at the moment we only have the round fountains, which are really meant to be placed in the center of a square, really, it feels. And I was hoping, I mean, obviously I can't get into the more actual functional details of it and can't actually have small water spouts and things like that, but just as a small idea I wanted to test having these double fountains over here. As a small sideways fountain with this little, well, it's a mermaid, which doesn't really work out well for the theme, but just as a general idea, have this small fountain set up sideways with the rockwork around here, since I basically also had not much of an idea what to fill this in with, which is part of having a sort of organic layout. It's really easy to just make a park with an organic layout, or at least for me there usually isn't much of a strategy to it. It's just kind of lay out things as you go and see how you can like lay them out in things where you're happy with how they're laid out, but you inevitably always end up with these small spaces that you can't quite fit an attraction in, but you do want to do something with them. And the last thing I actually want to do is to have very dense foliage out there, because while it definitely helps to make things look a little bit more natural and a bit more inviting, I don't want to clog everything up with foliage and want to keep some things with some lower bushes or some different details as well. I basically just don't really want the park to become a jungle. Not to mention that I do still have a couple of sight lines which I really want to keep in mind. And one of them is also the tower at the entrance. So just by keeping this area a bit more open and having no trees over here, you can actually see the tower along the main streets from the little plaza in front of the Alpine building station. And the Alpine coaster station, I should say, which is not a really huge deal, but it's just one of those sightlines which I really wanted to keep in there. And it just makes you feel like you're not just in this very small part of the park with foliage all around it, but more that it's or one hall, and you can very slightly see how certain areas transition into other areas, rather than just having a quick forest and a wall of trees and let that be it, because that's, I don't know, that just feels like a much more cheap and easy way to get along these things, when you can get much more out of them, and much more interesting of a flow of this area, basically, by just keeping it a little bit more open. It's also, in a sense, a way to sort of emulate the way that real paths flow, or at least I try to do so, because this is obviously a thing which I've complained about before, but it's something which I just have to keep in mind at the moment, is that the path system in the game has many issues, but one of them, theme park wise, is that real theme park paths are very wide and really just seas of concrete with a couple of obstacles and planters and rides in the middle of them, but they aren't really small paths that go through foliage. It's more or less the other way around. There's just a lot of path everywhere, and there's some foliage here and there with some buildings and scenery as well, which you have these very large open areas with paths, which is hard to actually get to in the game, and which I also try to at least get in as much as I can without having it look very awkward and forced, if that makes any sense at all. Anyway, I wanted to very quickly finish the backsides of these buildings in a more sophisticated manner than what I had before, since before I thought that you wouldn't really be able to see these buildings, but it turned out, which is partly something that I'm really glad about, that these trees do actually get higher than the, that these buildings do actually go higher than the trees which I tried to place to cover them up over there. So I wanted to just get some very simple details on them on the backside here, just so when you approach the Roman area from the park entrance, you can see these Roman houses just above the trees, as a sort of hint of what's to come in the area, I guess. And it's something which I couldn't really avoid, so I really just wanted to theme them as well, and just, rather than break the immersion here, just go along with the idea of having these things come over the trees a little bit. Not to mention that on that little path on the side there, I do want to theme it a little bit and not make it just a transition path between areas, but actually make it a proper part of the Roman area by adding a Roman restaurant at some point in the future over there. But that's something for the next episode, and I probably shouldn't really talk about that quite yet, since I'm not getting to that yet. Because this is the area where I am going to have the Triumphal Arch, just because I felt that this would be the best place to have it. It's also an area where I felt I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with it, because the main issue with this area is that obviously the part with the dive coaster is raised and the rest of the park is much lower than that, and I needed the paths to actually go down to the level of the rest of the park, and it's hard to really keep like the wide flowy plaza path style, as you have to go down and have these small paths that will have to go down over the rocks over there. So instead I figured I might as well add the arch over here and create a large open area to sort of have the arch as a center point weenie over here, rather than trying to do some stuff on the rocks, like having more buildings or closing it up in that way, which is a bit of a risk. I really wasn't sure if I wanted to do it this way, because if it doesn't really work out, I would end up basically with this enormous sea of just rocks over here. And obviously, since there is these sloped paths over there, I can't really work with any flat rides or anything either to make it a little bit more filled up, but that's something to also get to next episode. But yeah, for the arch itself, it's very, very heavily inspired by Constantine's arch in Rome. Pretty much, I think it's not on the Roman Forum, but it's very close to the Colosseum, I believe. And it's really one of the most beautiful, if not the best, I think, triumphal arches that are out there. And it's something which I just wanted to remake with having the 3 arches. It's very much like the Triumphal Arch in Paris, which is arguably the most famous one, but that one only has 1 arch in the middle of it, and I just really liked having these arches on the side as well. And it's just something that I really wanted to try here. It's an idea which I wanted to try for quite a long time, but really haven't done yet. And at this point I just figured, well, might just throw a shot at it and see how well it goes, and it might just end up in an episode, and here we are. That's basically what happened. Though I did fuck up a couple of things, like this little pillar over here where I completely forgot how I actually positioned these beams to make a proper pillar out of them. But yeah, this is in the end what became of it, basically. Now this arch does really differ from Constantine's one in a number of ways because of a number of reasons. Which is, well, first I really just wanted to make my own type of arch and at least not completely copy one in real life. I also just had to do so since there are just certain pieces that I would need that we just don't have in the game, at least not yet. And sometimes just out of convenience because some things are easier to do in a different way. The pillars actually are an example of that. In real life, these arches, between the arches have a little bit of space, like the walls are quite wide between the different arches, but since there aren't any half tile walls in the game and only full tile walls, which you obviously can't really make those very narrow walls between the arches, I just place those pillars in the middle of them to still be able to keep the arches at some distance from each other. But that's also why I did place the central arch on a separate grid, on a separate building, and made that 1.5 tiles wide, so that I could still get those quarter tile wide differences between the different arches, which is actually what made a pretty big difference, literally and figuratively in the end, with how the arch looks, by just having that small, or well, very thick wall in between the arches, much like real arches really do have. So yeah, that's really the general idea behind it, and aside from that, it was just a lot of trying different things and seeing what's really possible and what I could add. It was in this case more of a looking at the pieces in game and seeing what I could do with it than looking what I would like to build and then looking at the pieces in game to see how I could build that certain thing. Like, usually I come up with something that I would like to build and then see how I can use the pieces in the game to actually achieve it. Which is also how I would recommend anyone to build anything at any point in time, because it's much easier to start thinking out of the box with certain uses that you can have for objects. Like, I don't think anybody comes up with the idea to just use a chimney as a pillar out of the blue. It was pretty much an idea that also spawned from the fact that I was looking for a certain type of shape for a pillar, and it turned out that the chimney was the best thing to go with when it comes to that. But in this case, it was a little bit different, since I had a general idea of what I wanted to do with the arch, but apart from that, I really just wanted to look at the pieces in the game and see what things were actually most fit. There were actually a couple of things which did positively surprise me, like the fact that these scenery pieces are actually very useful for the pillars. I wasn't really happy with the barrels though, but it actually turned out that the little pufferfish thing, or blowfish, whatever it is actually pretty handy, as long as there's actually that thing above it for the leaves. Because basically, there are the couple of different types of classic pillars, and I wanted to really have Corinthian pillars which have leaves on them, which is pretty much impossible, I was afraid. But it turned out that the little pufferfish scenery item actually did have some leaves underneath it. It just had a pufferfish on top of which I could really do without. But in the end, at least the ridge above the pillars ended up doing a pretty good job of pretty much making the pufferfish, or whatever fish it really is, I'm no biologist, to make that damn thing invisible and make this at least a little bit more realistic. So there was a bit of struggling with different things there. I also have to say that a lot of time was in the end spent on fine-tuning this arch, since I really got the base down quite quickly and had a certain idea of what I wanted to do, but when it comes to the really minor details, it really took a lot of messing about with things to actually get to a point where I was happy with how it looked. Like at this point in time, I wasn't really too happy with the top of the building since it seemed a bit too narrow. I do like it somewhat, but it's not Roman, and it's not even a shape that I very commonly see, so I wanted to make that a bit higher as well. And when it comes to certain other things, in real life these things are just dressed up with lots of sculptures along the side, lots of murals, and also some letters and numbers probably alongside the top as well to whomever they were erected for, or whoever was narcissistic enough to want to have an arch somewhere on a plaza somewhere. And obviously I can't really get those things in, so there was just a lot of just opening random scenery items in the game and seeing what I could actually do with them. The general idea behind this arch was really though to tie the Roman area a bit more together as well. Like I said before, having that little slope area with the rocks where I basically couldn't do anything because there are sloped paths and you can't really attach buildings around it very easily, and it's very awkward since you can't make a grassy hill either. And like on the other side, I got rid of that problem by basically having the 0G roll go over the path, having that small aqueduct and just having a passage through buildings, but it wasn't quite so easy to make that here. So I wanted something to at least be able to expand the Roman area into this direction, but not make it feel like there are two separate parts, like you have the part which is high up and you have the part which is lower over here, and that there's no connection really between them. And I guess this was really my only idea I had to make that happen, like an arch which from here really makes, like all the different paths actually go toward this arch, which is quite funny. Considering the saying, I don't know if this is actually an English saying as well, but considering the saying that all roads lead to Rome somewhere. But yeah, that's basically why I felt like I wanted to have this thing basically as an object which you could see from the entire area and be more or less the center point of it. There is probably a better word to describe it, but probably said that enough at this point in time. But yeah, that's basically the general idea behind it. And then alongside this thing, there are still a couple of ideas which I have, and a couple of ideas which I also got from comments which I'm still thinking about. The first thing which I'll add around here is a restaurant, and I'll probably also have the flat ride, the one round flat ride which I haven't placed in the park yet, which I really felt fits quite well with the Roman theme somehow. I have no idea why I feel that, but besides I still need a flat ride in here somewhere. But also an idea which I got so many requests to make a Colosseum, which is something that I might feature in some way, but I'm definitely not going to make a Colosseum, not even a small one. I just feel like Cucamonda has done like too amazing of a job at it already to even try doing it, and I don't really see much of a point even. But what I do love to make perhaps is an amphitheater, or is that pronounced right? Anyway, yeah, like one of these little theaters, much like the, I think it's Marco Polo Theater in Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. Because you see theaters a lot in theme parks, obviously, and I don't even have one over here at the moment, and what better theme to do it with than a Roman theme, really, I feel. So even if I won't make it a Colosseum, which is very likely, I do still want to make a simple theater alongside the side of this plaza somewhere. And so basically, it will be filled up with rides and places to go alongside all of the sides of this plaza. I don't want to just make it a simple plaza in the middle of nowhere, which would make the arch in the middle quite an underwhelming thing, really. So this will be quite a centerpiece for this area, but then again, I won't really expand the Roman area much beside that. I've been thinking about a dark ride, but I'm not really sure if that's really manageable in the time, and if it's really worth it to get the effort to actually build a full dark ride, which if I do so, I would want to put a lot of effort into, and I do want to finish this park before the end of this alpha, and also before it completely crashes and before it reaches terrible FPS, or at least an unworkable frame rate. So I probably won't be adding a dark ride, so that will really be my only plans for the Roman area. It's perhaps almost going to double in size from what it is now, or just a bit more, but it's not going to be that huge, so there will still be space left for different themes. And then I'll just have to at some point decide what the best themes are. I haven't really tried too much. I've tried a couple of Dutch buildings, and as much as I would love to do the theme, I am a little less confident that I can actually do it than the last time that I announced it, since I tried it and it didn't even work out that well. It's possible, but only if you stretch the theme very much, and if you try to keep it just to the basics, it just turns out very boring. So I might do it, but just go not that realistic with it and have more fantasy details to it in a way. But there are also some other themes. A Viking theme is a possibility. I've also been thinking about an Arabian theme, as similar to an Italian theme as it is, really. And those are just the things that are on my mind at the moment. Anyway, that's it for this episode. I'm not going to overview this thing quite yet, and I'll really save that until this general plaza is finished. But thank you guys for watching this episode, and see you later.